Eoin O'Donnellan is my name. Born and reared here in Salthill in Kingston here in Galway in 1963. So yeah, and actually I haven't moved too far really. I'm only up the road now, so I am. So I kind of get a nosebleed if I go too far out of Salthill. But yeah, so that's where I'm living with my wife Deirdre and two kids, Ross and Louise. Well, they're away at the minute, but yeah. And Nugget the dog. Where I lived and reared in Kingston there, there was a great neighbourhood, to be honest, back in the 60s and 70s, you know. As I said to you earlier, my father passed away in 76. I was highly involved in sport, and which was kind of a saving grace for me in the sense that, you know, I had a lot of outlets to go to with Salthill GA, Corinthians Rugby Club. I went to school I went to Scolarsa, then Scolignog and the Jazz here. And so I rode with the Jazz. So sport was a big thing. The neighbourhood itself, we had fantastic neighbours, good buddies around there, lifelong buddies actually, even though a lot of them are, well, no, one or two are overseas at the minute. But yeah, it was good. It was actually quite good. As I say, we went to Scolarsa initially, and you had to leave there when you were in first class, I think it was. It was a high infantry first class, but I think it was first class. And then I went to Scolignog then. It was the old, as in, it's where the new Colostignog is now in the old building, even though it's been revamped. That's where I went to school for my primary school, and then into Colostignog, into the senior Jesuit school there, yeah, in Sea Road. So I was there. I went in 76 to 82. And from there I went up to the RTC. So yeah, so it was actually pretty good. A lot of good people in there, good fun. I think the Jesuit ethos was, maybe to my but the Jesuit ethos was, you know, if you want to do it, we'll help you do it. If you don't want to do it, it's entirely up to yourself. So I was kind of in a halfway house there. I'm not sure it was a corporal punishment, I'm not sure what it was, but they had the old Slitter all right, you know. Now, I can't remember ever getting it in Scolarsa, but in Scolignog now, yes, yeah, if you were out of order or perceived to be out of order, you got the, was it 2 of the best or 6 of the best? Generally for me it was 6 of the best, yeah. So you had the handout where you didn't want to get it with the bamboo or the leather Slitter, or the leather was across the knuckle here. That's where you definitely didn't want to get it. You didn't so much mind getting it across the fingers. It stung, and it stung for a while, but across here, because that was quite sore now. So you're trying to angle your hand in such a way that you wouldn't be so tough on you. Each era has a different way of dealing with things. That was the way back then. For some people, it affected them. You know, it definitely did. It didn't affect me dramatically. You know, I probably deserved a good bit of it. So, but for some, it possibly did. So, you know, I don't want to be frivolous about it either. O'Donnell's Craft Shop is what it was called in Key Street there, which was a great street. It was back in the 80s, and you had, and again, talking about neighbours, that I had great neighbours in Kingston there, but there was great neighbours. My mother, she started the craft shop back in the 80s, probably back actually the late 70s. She had it for 12 years, and down in Key Street there was where the old what do you call it, pet shop was, where the old pet shop was. I think it's a noodle shop now actually, but she had that for 12 years. So yeah, great neighbours. You had Rocket Tile Centre, you had Crockwell Electric, you had the Keys across the road, you had McDonald's Fish Shop, you know. And actually, if I'm right in thinking, that we had the first Key Street Festival my mother was part of and on a committee there, and it was great fun. There was a bit like, I suppose, what do you call the festival that's on nowadays, you know, the Arts Festival, correct? And you have the parade down Shop Street, but they had a Key Street Festival parade as well. My mother had the craft shop, myself, my sister, my brothers, we were involved in it. We were indoctrinated into it by my mother, wearing Irish bonnets and Aaron jumpers. But it was great crack, great time, and Key Street was a lovely street back then. Even in Shop Street, I mean, Shop Street wasn't pedestrianised back in those times as well. And on a Saturday night, obviously, when you're a bit older, 18, 19, 20, you might go to the Skeff or the Cellar, and all the discos were out in Salthill back then. You know, the Oasis, the Warwick, etc., and the International, the Holiday Hotel. So you had all the discos. So what happened? You'd have your beers or whatever it might be in the Skeff, and then you got the 11 o'clock bus out, the double-deckers bus. And if you missed that, you ran down as far as Brennan's shoe shop to get it down there. If you missed that, you went as far as the Lisheen, and then if you missed that, yeah, you got to walk. You know, you're in trouble. But yeah, so it wasn't pedestrianised Shop Street either back then. Yeah. Well, as I said, I went from Closh from the Jazz. I went to the RTC. I did Stodge Gno up there for a couple of years, and then did a tiny bit of travelling. Met Deirdre, my wife, actually, in the RTC, and I did a tiny bit of travelling, not much to be, you know, a few summers here and there, and then I went into the financial services. and I worked with a brokerage, and then from the brokerage I worked with an insurance company. I did 12 years with Bank of Ireland Lifetime, and then in 1999 I went out my own as an insurance broker. But sport was a big backdrop to what I did. Gaelic, rugby, as I say, with Salthill, with Corinthians. So when the downturn came, you know, being a mortgage broker back in 2008, 9 and 10 probably wasn't the best place to be. So I took my hobby and I turned it into a business. And building down in Dockgate, there was an empty boardroom. I had a small office on the 3rd floor in Dockgate, small financial services office there. But there was an empty boardroom on the 4th floor. And so I kind of did 1 or 2 classes, keep fit classes up there. And then from there I went to the Salthill GA Club for 5 years. They were great. Worked out of there for 5 years. And then a few different places. And now I'm actually based out of the Galway Bay Hotel. So Dan Murphy was very good in allocating me a room, the Inishia room down there. So we actually apply our classes down there. And then I have a variety of other activities that I coordinate. We have a choir, we have 40 in the choir. We do dance, we do yoga, we do Pilates. There's a variety of other different activities. Badminton, pickleball, which is the new one. So I kind of event manage them. I conduct my own classes, my own exercise, keep fit classes. And the demographic that come to me are kind of my own age. You know, they're kind of probably 50 years of age plus is the demographic that come to me. So it's social as well as exercise. And then I kind of create all these other, not create them because they're already in place, but I organize all these other activities. Not everyone wants to do my class, but everyone wants to do something. Yeah, so and it's all based out of Salthill generally. Even though in the next week I'm going, I've taken the lease on a 1st floor, and we're going to do coordinate yoga and Pilates there in Barna. So we're going to expand out to Barna as well over the next week or 2. Yeah, so there's a good bit happening, but it's all sport and feel good factor related. I remember one lady one Christmas, she texted me and she said, because ladies, not maybe so much nowadays, even though the average age has probably increased a bit, but back in the day, as in 10, 15 years ago, the average age of ladies giving up sport was maybe 15, 16. So one lady, as I say, it's a kind of 50 years of age plus the demographic that come to me. She sent me a text and she said she was so happy to belong to a group because she never in school belonged to a group playing sport, you know, and she just felt part of a kind of a community, if you want to call it that. So there's that element to it too. It's the exercise, which is massive, but it's also the community factor. Yeah. So the name of it's UBFit. What is the name of the business? Yeah. And I came up with that name. You heard of UB40, yeah, and UB40 got their name on the basis that there was 4 lads and they were signing on, I think it was, one day, and they hadn't got the name of a band. They were in a band, they hadn't got the name of the band, and then the form that they were filling in was called Unemployment Benefits Form 40. That's where these guys seemingly got their name. I'm open to being corrected there, but at the same time, so UB40 is where they got their name. So obviously when the demise came, and I was a mortgage broker, and I was starting this business, so I thought, well, UBFit. So hence the reason the name. Even though one fella said to me one day, he said to me, "Where did you get that name?" And I knew he hadn't a clue really. And I said, "What name?" He said, UBFit. He said, UBFit. So anyway, so that's kind of the backdrop as to from school. There's obviously, you know, X amount of years in between. So a lot has happened, but the vast majority of it has been good.
Could you give us kind of an idea of the changes Galway has seen since you were a young fella to now? Yeah,
well, I suppose you touched a little bit of it there in the context of the town, for example, you know, the pedestrianisation as against, you know, the traffic flow through town. It was probably, how will I phrase it? You know, there's a lot of compliance nowadays, and a lot of it rightly so, you know, in all aspects of things. Sometimes maybe a little bit too far with compliance, but at the same time, back then it was possibly a little bit more freer. You know, the people went about with maybe kind of more freedom in the context of what they did, be it sociably or be it in sport. Like sport, for example, has got quite serious nowadays in the context of, you know, say the GA or rugby or whatever. It's full on with nutrition and, you know, sports science and all that area. So it probably has gone from being a bit, you know, back 70s, 80s, 90s to being, you worked hard, but you kind of played hard. Now they work hard now too, and they play hard, but there's a lot more kind of, it's far more regimental, I think. but every year is different, as I said earlier, and that's good too. You know, you can't be frivolous about everything, and if you take your sport or your work or whatever, you know, you can't be too laid back about it. So there's a balance. There's a balance. But back then, it was great. You know, I remember, for example, with Salthill GA, I remember because where I lived in Kingston. You know, you might know where Capone's is now, and that area, and Joyce's or Tesco's it is now. They weren't there. Our houses were the last few houses. They were all green fields, right? So there was no Knocknacara, no. There was Clybourne Road, obviously. Seacrest was just about been built. But my point about it is that so we had no in GA terms. There's a lot of street leagues nowadays. You know, you have underage. We had no team out in Kingston because there was no Knocknacara effectively. So I remember one of my buddies ringing me up. It's just going back to what you were saying there about what was different. I was only about 9, and my buddy Joe Lally from Rockbarton, he rang me up and said, look, we have an under 10. He was only 9 himself. I don't know how he got my number because there was no mobile phones back then. And he said, we're short a man, will you come down? So I hopped on the bike. I don't even think I told my mother. I was only about 9 years of age. You know, when you hop on a bike, you go down. And the only time you were called in, you know, was when it was dinner time or it was definitely past your bedtime, you know. So, you know, so you went down, played the match, and then you hopped on the bike and went home again. Nowadays, obviously, and rightly so, because, you know, it's a bit more complicated out there these days. You know, you gotta be mindful of where you're going at that age, and your parents have to be mindful of your guardians. Sport was the big area that I was involved in. You know, all my life really. I always remember, you know, playing the 3 goals in against the garage door out in Kingston with my buddies, and I know I'm repeating myself now, but then you had Salthill GA, which were fantastic for me growing up, and all the crew that used to call to the house. And I don't want to mention any individual because otherwise, if they're listening to it and they're not mentioned, they might feel a bit left out. But they were fantastic people back then. They'd knock on your door and they'd kind of say, come on, we're heading to the match, into the car, off to Tuam or wherever it might be. And then obviously Corinthians, we were actually based up in College Road back then. So we were based at Ardnagregg in College Road, and we'd go over to the sports ground to play our matches. And then they bought Clonacawny, and we used to still tug for a good few years in Ardnagregg in College Road, and we get a car out on a Tuesday and Thursday out to Clonacawny, you know, and train there. And we were great. The Corinthians was fantastic as well. You know, the Gaelic, the rugby. Rowing, I rowed for 6 years in the Jez. We went to Henley one year, which was fantastic. We fundraised and went to Henley. I remember that. That was a long trip. Father Eddie Divley drove the bus, and you know, you went bus, the boats, and you're on the bus like 24 hours through the night. And we arrived in Henley, and anyone knows Henley, like it's very, very. Well, let's call it's elitist in one sense, you know, but rowing is fantastic and it's for everybody. But just Henley, in that time particularly, there was the top hats. We arrived all bedraggled, you know, and off the bus to find out. We looked at the notice board. There was no online stuff back then. When we arrived, we see who we're rowing against, to find out we're rowing against the #1 American crew. Yeah, and we weren't even #1 in Ireland, like, you know, and I'll never forget, they're going up the river to the start of the race was equal to our race pace, you know, so they were nearly home back in New York by the time we finished, but it was a great experience. But Gaelic rowing, and then obviously I played a bit of soccer with Salthill Devon, you know, down in Devon Park there, or wherever it might be that we played the matches. I remember tugging out in Brennan's house there in Devon Park, underage for Salthill Devon. Yeah, so I used to play. I'd regard myself, some people regard me as a GA person or a rugby person. I regard myself really as a sports person. You know, I love all sports and try to play. And I was blessed. I was on some great teams, fantastic teams, and we did well. So I was blessed like that. And then, as I say, you can't win at everything. There was teams I was on that we didn't win, you know. But the crack along the way and the social aspect of it, and the great friends, you know. I remember we used to do cross country. We're in the Claddagh here in the swamp. This where we used to do cross country at school, and I have a lot of buddies. We did our confirmation in the Claddagh Church. The Jez and the Claddagh National School teamed up, and we did a confirmation here in the Claddagh Church, you know. So I have great friends all over, really, you know, all over. There was. Yeah, back then maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe this isn't true, but you had a wider circle of friends maybe because Galway was smaller. So I had buddies over in Renmore, Merview, Salthill, you know, Claddagh, yeah. So So it was kind of, it was a pretty active time, I have to say, but you kind of created your own activity too, you know, and you had to get, like, that's the beauty about Galway. Galway is only a big town, you know, it's not, people say it's a city, and maybe in the context of numbers it is, but in the context of what it is, it's a big town, so it's easy. I'm living in Salthill. If I want to get to Renmore on a bike, I'd be there in half an hour, you know, so one side of the city to the other, you know, so so I've good buddies all over, yeah.
Can you remember when you were at your truly happiest?
Wow. When truly happiest, I suppose, A, when I got married, B, when my son Ross was born, and C, when my daughter Louise was born. Yeah, they were probably, they were the three most happiest moments of my life. And then obviously, you know, extended out to that, there's a lot of happy moments, you know, when you think back in the context of sporting achievements. I mean, I was manager of Salthill when we won the All-Ireland Club Final back in 2006. That was a fantastic. With Corinthians, we won an All-Ireland Debateman Cup. Was it 84, 85, around then? And we had a wild week that week. Yeah, so they were, in sporting terms, domestic terms, obviously, wife Ross and Deirdre and Louise, and then in the context of sport, those various achievements. Won a county final in 1990 with Salthill. Yeah, and then and just the lead up to it, the whole actual moments themselves, the match days, etc., and then the follow-on, the social aspect of it. So I suppose that's just straight off the top of my head, without thinking about it too deeply. There's probably a good few more, you know.
Do you have any regrets so far?
Not studying harder at school, maybe, but that was my DNA any which way. Even if I turned back the clock, I probably wasn't going to study much harder at school, you know. But you know, probably that, you know, do I have much regrets? I don't really. I mean, you know, you're in the moment at any given time, you know. So you just you go with whatever route you're going with, and you can never turn back the clock. So I'm not so sure, you know, you'll always think back and say, oh, I should have done that different, this different, if that was. But, you know, as Johnny Giles says, there's no, in sport terms, there's no ifs, buts or maybes, you know. So you just got to, whatever card you're dealt, you just got to move with that card, you know. And, if, you know, and all you can do is do your best, be fair to everyone around you. You know, firm but fair in business, firm but fair in sport. And then my family are firm but fair with me. So I'm not sure they're fair, but actually, I'm only teasing.
If you could go back in time and give a young Eoin one piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, one piece of advice for young Eoin. Well, it would be, you know, maybe to say, I'm going back to the studies, for example, you know, apply myself more to the studies. And maybe take them a bit more serious, you know, in that sense. So, you know, but that maybe is a different one. Do you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, that something on that area, perhaps, on the academic side of it. I was never a great one for taking advice, actually. So to give myself advice, I'm not so sure would I heed it any which way.